Viewers, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day and welcome to another interesting episode of Global Arena on my YouTube channel, Global Arena TV. I'm your host, Umar Isa Indigo. Today I've got an incredible panel of experts who will talk us through what's been going on in the UK and the US. We are talking about the election that took place on Thursday, the 4th of July, 2024 in the UK, which brought back the Labour Party to power after being away from the number 10 Downing Street for about 14 years. We have seen the Conservative Party ruling the country since 2010, starting with David Cameron, up to the shortest serving Prime Minister Liz Truss and now Rishi Sunak. Well, to discuss this and potentially the future of the UK relations with other countries, especially the United States of America, the biggest ally and African continents, I've got from the UK Hugh Fraser, who has been giving us constantly giving us analysis on the situation before and even during the elections. Hugh Fraser from the UK, thank you very much for joining us.
Happy to be with you, Umar.
All right, from the United States of America, I have got Professor Jeff Kelly Lowenstein, an investigative journalist and a professor at Grand Valley State University in the US state of Michigan, who I had the pleasure of speaking to his students a couple of months ago. Thank you very much, Professor Kelly, for joining us back, for coming back.
Thank you very much, Umar. It's an honor to be here with Hugh and you, and congratulations on your graduation and new position. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and we're very proud of you.
Thank you very much indeed. So let's kick off the show. Hugh Fraser, as you are in the UK, you sent me a video earlier saying that there is no much enthusiasm on the part of the citizens of the UK, despite the fact that there has been a change of the government. Why is it that people are not enthusiastic of Labour coming back to office, to the position of power?
Well, since I sent you that piece, Sir Keir Starmer has given a speech in which he called it a loveless landslide, meaning there's no great love. And yes, it does play a big contrast with when Labour got in under Tony Blair in 1997, when there really was a kind of party atmosphere. I think there has been a disillusionment with politicians in general over the last 20 years, and a feeling that they're all the same, and that people feel let down by the Conservative government more than that they love the Labour government. And Sir Keir Starmer, although he does have a certain gravitas, he's a very dull politician, and he's not someone that people get very excited about at all. And he plays his cards close to his chest. He doesn't really say much about what he's going to do. He tries to say as little as possible. But this might play quite well for Labour, because in a way it's good to come in without too high expectations, because it lowers the bar, and almost anything good you do will be kind of a surprise on the right side. Mm. So, but there definitely is a feeling of kind of dampness, not just in the weather.
Okay, briefly before I go to Professor Kelly, it seems like the people of the UK, the British people, are tired of the Tories, the Tory government, and that's why they sort of elected. They have gone for a change, sort of a thing. Do you think that under Labour Party, some of the issues, some of the reasons why the Conservative have been sort of voted out of the office will be addressed by the Labour Party under Sir Keir Starmer?
No, I don't, because they don't really disagree on much, apart from Labour would probably spend more and tax more, probably tax savings. But they would carry on a lot of the same policies. They're very enthusiastic about net zero, which has become very unpopular due to high energy prices. In fact, they want to decarbonize the energy grid by 2030. They're lucky in a way because inflation has come down, and that's been very, very unpopular, but it's already come down. On foreign policy, they are pretty much identical on Ukraine and Palestine, though there is, as I mentioned, some pressure in the Labour Party to take a softer line on Palestine. On almost everything, they're very much the same, except we don't fully know, because we think Sir Keir Starmer is quite canny and he hasn't said everything he wants to do. So people aren't really expecting a great change. I don't think they are, but we are waiting and seeing what will happen.
Professor Jeff Kelly Lowenstein, coming back to you, how is this election viewed in the United States of America?
Well, I would say that on the whole, a lot of Americans are quite focused on the impending U.S. election that will be taking place in November. For those who are following, I think some people are drawing hope from different sides of the political spectrum about the significant change that Labor has, coming in with a massive victory after 14 years of Tory rule, and certainly the points that Hugh Fraser was making around the fatigue and mistrust that many people feel toward politicians. I think that's shared across the ocean. Certainly, as you alluded to, Umar, it's a very important and historic relationship. And we may talk about this a little bit later, with the combination of President Biden's really disastrous debate performance and what's going to happen on his side, and then the Supreme Court granting President Trump and other presidents absolute immunity and, quote, core presidential functions. I think there's a lot of attention on that, not quite as much on what's happening in England. That's my thought. I can't speak for everybody, but that's my perception.
But Professor Kelly, how significant is the UK? How significant a partner is the UK to the United States of America? And is this change of government going to affect the relationship?
Well, it's a very significant partner. It's a historic partner. It's a very long-term and sturdy relationship that has had different strains and challenges at different points, but certainly under President Biden and with the crisis in the Ukraine, President Biden has moved much more toward reintegrating the United States into the global community, fortifying NATO and its presence. President Trump had a much more adversarial take, a much more isolationist, U.S.-focused approach. So I think overall things are in a better place. But certainly the relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. is a very important and historic relationship.
Hugh Fraser, on the foreign policy thing, are we going to see Sir Keir Starmer taking a different position when it comes to the war in Gaza, for example, or the attention that should be given to the war, another devastating war taking place in Sudan, and other foreign policy stuff? Are we going to see a change sort of?
Well, there is a possibility in the war in Gaza. So Sir Keir Starmer has been, if anything, more kind of adamantly pro-Israel than the Conservatives. And he's taken a very extreme stance. He said that he's a committed Zionist. And when he was asked if it was okay to cut off food and water, he said so long as it's within the law, he's all for it. And this caused a massive backlash against Labour, and they suffered. They actually lost some seats in areas where we have a concentrated Muslim population and where the feeling is very strong on this issue. So Labour are a bit worried about it. So we may see some backtracking. And they've talked about recognising Palestine, but they've also said that Palestine's in no position to be recognised at the moment, because it's too much chaos with the war. So it is kind of a meaningless gesture. Sir Keir is seen as very much pro-American, an Atlanticist. He has always maintained contacts with America and with the American intelligence community and with the American Justice Department, quite controversially, really. He's seen as very, very pro-America.
Okay, Professor Kelly, given the fact that Joe Biden is said to have some weaknesses, looking at the debate that took place last week between him and Donald Trump. He had chances of beating Donald Trump, but unfortunately he couldn't take it. He was so weak. He looked ill. He looked, and some people started saying he's even becoming unfit mentally to serve as the U.S. president. On the other hand, there are many people who think, who even have the willingness to vote for Donald Trump, and they think like this guy could come back as the U.S. President. Do you think that there is a high possibility that Donald Trump is coming back?
Well, I certainly think he had a very serious chance before the debate, Umar, and that since the debate, I think his chances have improved. At the same time, even before had Joe Biden had a fine debate, there were a number of different aspects that would make Donald Trump's reelection a very realistic possibility. The first is he won before. The second is that he came close to winning in 2020. The third is that many of the same kind of constituents that Hugh Fraser was just talking about in terms of young people and Muslim folks are very, very angry at President Biden's response to the October 7th attacks and then the devastating war in Gaza. There were other members. President Biden won by a very narrow margin in key states in 2020. And so it only takes a few people in each of those states to flip the balance. And the other part is that President Trump has consistently and to this day maintained the lie that he won the election in 2020. And so the Republican Party is really united around that. And on the state level, in many different states in the United States, made it more difficult for people to vote. So all of those factors made it possible to begin with. And I would say it's important to note that President Trump himself is 78, who is just 3 years younger than President Biden. His debate performance was full of outright lies. He also did not speak in coherent manner at different points. At the same time, President Biden's response was so halting, so faltering, so incoherent that there's real questions that are being focused to a greater degree on him, I would say at the moment, and then the implications for the election, than on President Trump.
Yes, of course, there were some instances in which Joe Biden was sort of deflecting or deviating from derailing, if I could use this word, from the points that he was raising. And so a lot of people started saying maybe he has dementia and it really influenced his performance. And on the other side, you said Donald Trump is like 3 years younger than Joe Biden, but he looks a bit stronger, if I could use this term, than Joe Biden, which gives him an advantage, right?
So, yeah, from an optics and perception point of view, President Trump seemed relaxed. He seemed vigorous. And so he benefited from that contrast where President Biden, at certain points, especially in the first 10 minutes, really was faltering in his speech, had trouble finishing his thoughts, was not really coherent. So that was very, I think, for a lot of people, painful to watch our leader be in that state. As I just said a minute ago, at the same time, while President Trump seemed physically vigorous, his statements were full of many, many lies. He refused to accept the legitimacy of the election, which Rishi Sunak and the conservatives did, to have a peaceful transfer of power. He said openly that he would prosecute his political opponents. And then, as I mentioned, the subsequent Supreme Court decision would very arguably give him immunity, as if it was defined as a core presidential function. So, yes, physically, President Trump had a contrast and seemed more vital. At the same time, quite a few people are aware of the substance of what President Trump was saying and the very troubling dimensions of it for some people. Other people think it's wonderful, and he has tens of millions of supporters, even after a felony conviction on 34 counts from the court in New York.
All right. Yes, of course. Joining us now is Dr. Ali Musa, who is a lecturer at Coventry University, one of the co-founders of Mikia TV, a YouTube channel that I have been freelancing for. Before I get to you, thank you very much, Dr. Ali Musa, for joining us. He's a Nigerian, so he's going to speak more about his experience of the UK election. Dr. Ali Musa, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the show as well. And yes, just a little correction. I have been a lecturer at Coventry University, although currently I've been away for a while. So I have not been in the university for a while, really. So
all right, yeah, noted. Yes, the correction the correction is noted. We've been speaking a lot about the election of the Labour Party to the number 10 Downing Street. Hugh Fraser, how do you see the future relations between the UK and the US under Trump if he gets re-elected?
Why is he fighting him?
Well, I think that could be problematic with a Labour government and President Trump. So Keir Starmer is kind of the opposite of Trump. I think he would be a very pro-NATO. He's a very establishments type of figure, even though he's a socialist and he says, from humble background. He's a very establishment figure. He has very close connection with the intelligence community. He would be a very pro-Europe, pro-NATO person. He'd be very committed to the war against Russia through Ukraine. So I think relations would be quite difficult between the Labour government and President Trump. But maybe he will see the wisdom of being diplomatic, and we need to cooperate with the USA. So we shall see. We shall see. As I say, he's not someone who shoots his mouth off that much. He's unlikely to say any terrible diplomatic things, except slightly by accident. He sometimes makes a gaffe, I suppose. So I think that it would be tense.
All right, which would make it intensely serious and also interesting to look at. Before I jump to Professor Kelly, Dr. Ali Musa, come in and talk to us about how you have viewed the election in the UK from where you are in the country. And Africans and Nigerians who have been living in the UK for an extended period of time, like you, eligible to vote? Were you eligible to vote?
Well, of course, it depends on a number of variables. First of all, most people who are from countries that have got some sort of ties with the United Kingdom are allowed to vote. For example, if you're from a Commonwealth country like Nigeria, you are eligible to vote. I've been voting since I came to the UK about 20 years ago. So people from Nigeria, Ghana, and most countries that were colonized by the United Kingdom are eligible to vote. And then people that have settled here, who have got some citizenship or settled status in the United Kingdom, even though they are from other countries, including Africa, are allowed to vote. And so many other things.
Yes. All right. Yes. So, is it possible for you to reveal the party that most of you people, most of you Africans who are eligible to vote, voted for?
Well, again, it depends on interests and what you think. What you think appeals to you may not appeal to me. Generally, mostly Africans tend to have some sort of ties with Labour Party, and then some people tend to, because they think Labour seems to have some sort of soft heart for Africans. You know, it has kind of some sort of relaxed policies towards immigration and
Yes.
so many other things really. Although I know for so many years now, nobody really speaks for immigration. Everyone is trying to be a bit careful because in the United Kingdom, immigration is a very big issue. Whoever wants to come to power will try to, as much as possible, keep it sort of careful, not to say I'm going to do something to do anything that would allow more people come into the United Kingdom. Because one of the things that really got the conservatives into trouble is because the number of people migrating to the United Kingdom has been rising progressively rather than coming down. So people come in and they don't get out, among other things. So Labour was blamed for that 14 years ago. And the conservatives came in and said we're going to solve the problem, but it ended up not being able to solve the problem. So Labour, the conservatives also came in rather than solving the problem, in spite of the many restrictions they have introduced, including visa restrictions, including the Rwanda deal and whatever, which of course has just been, it have just started implementing it with a few people sent to Rwanda. Hasn't been helpful in any way. So the new Labour government will still be very careful. So people from Africa and other countries, the third world, seem to think Labour is a bit lenient on that.
Yes.
Professor so Labour is
okay.
Is the
yes. Okay, Labour is a bit lenient when it comes to immigration policies. They are not going to send migrants to Rwanda, as the Home Secretary Suella Braverman has been under Tory's government has been advocating for.
The Labour government did say if they were elected, that was before the election, if they were elected, they would revisit the issue and make sure that it they would not go with it. So it's not like saying that we are not going to it's not like saying we are not going to allow people to come in anyhow, but we do not really go for that Rwanda thing. Because if you look at it in the real economic sense, it doesn't really work for Britain. If you send one person there and spend hundreds of thousands of pounds for one person to keep him, it makes no economic sense. People want things that will save taxpayers money, and then at the same time keep people out. Bring in the best brains here, people who would improve the economy, and not people that would come here and depend on taxpayers' money. So that is just the basic thing. And people are saying, where you are going to do that. So probably that is the attraction towards the Labour Party. And then the second party, the two parties that have really been attracting people, including migrants these days, are the Workers' Party. George Galloway in particular is very popular. Is very popular with the Muslims. Is very popular with people from Africa. Is a person that people identify with. People who feel they are. They are not with the mainstream political parties. I've spoken to a number of people who say, well, even if he's not going to win, we want to support him for the future. At least if his party wins a number of seats, then we will know that this party is going to be here for the future.
Okay, thank you very much for this context and analysis. We have like 5 minutes to go, so let's split it carefully. Professor Kelly, how do you see, because 2024 is said to be an election year, what can you see as a professor of journalism about the level of coverage and the significance that the media organizations have given to the elections that have been conducted and those that have not been conducted that are about to take place, particularly that of the United States of America? What can you briefly say about it?
No, thank you, Umar. Just to make sure I understand, are you asking about the United States election? Because there's more than 80 countries around the world that are voting this year. It's an incredible voting year, about half the planet. So I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking so I can answer the question.
Yeah, I'm asking a question that is kind of two in one. A general question regarding the coverage of the elections in plural, and then specifically how the media focuses its attention to the American elections, the coverage.
Okay, no, thank you for the clarification. So what I would say, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that U.S. media tends to be somewhat U.S. focused, a bit insular. And so the majority of the focus combined with has been on the U.S. election, and that combines with the fact that our elections go on for many, many months. I mean, we've been hearing about the election since President Biden declared and President Trump. So that's a real kind of dominant feature. Billions of dollars go into it. So within the U.S. context, there's an awful lot of coverage of what's happening within the United States and what does it mean and what will go on and whatever happens at the presidential level, what that means for the lower levels of government and so on. So that's what I would say within the U.S. context. Globally, it's an extremely important year, as I said, because more than 80 countries are voting, and these are very significant elections in very large countries like India, the largest, most populous nation in the world, is having its elections, and then countries all over the world are having them. And so I would recommend, if people are interested, Andelman Unleashed. David Andelman is covering every single election this year and doing it in a very thorough and thoughtful way. So his Substack, he's a longtime journalist, published author, and so on, very concerned with international affairs. He has covered that very thoroughly. But as we saw, Britain just had their elections, France, I mean, just on and on and on. It's a very significant year for elections. So it's important to look at wider ranges of sources than U.S. media, which tends to be a bit more U.S. focused.
All right, definitely. Could you repeat his name so that we could go and search for him?
Oh, yeah, sure. Andelman Unleashed, Andelman Unleashed. And so what he does is he offers his own analysis, but he also goes to your question to every country and looks at really high level coverage and then shares that. He also has political cartoons, so people get a sense of that type of commenting and sharing about what's happening. So it's a very useful source, and he publishes once a week. David Andelman.
Yeah. I will search for him, and I will see how I can get his contact so that we can invite him to talk on the show.
I'm happy to put you in touch. He'd be a very good guest for the show.
Thank you very much indeed. You have been generously helping and contributing to Global Arena, and for that we are still grateful. We have 1 minute to go, so I'm going to split it between Hugh Fraser and Dr. Ali Musa. Hugh Fraser, your final words before we go on this.
Well, there's not a lot that's great to say about Britain these days, even our traditions. But one thing we do well is we do elections. We do them very quickly, very efficiently. We get the votes counted within hours in some cases. And certainly by the morning after, we know who's won. And we change the Prime Minister the next day. So it's a very, very clean process in Britain. It's a very simple, well understood, and there's a very high level of confidence in it, as there is in France as well. And I think this is just the one area, probably the only one, where we could show America something about how to run an election so that everyone has confidence in it. Because it doesn't matter who won the election. If people don't believe it was won and it looks like a shambles, then no one is going to have any trust in it. And I think it's just the one thing we do really well. We get the Prime Minister out and the new one in a few hours.
And there are no insurrections of the Capitol Hill, or in this case,
Well, no,
the
because
British
everyone
Parliament.
believes in the result. Everyone trusts the result. And besides, in this particular election, no one actually cares. I mean, to be honest, no one really cares who's prime minister anymore.
Yeah.
We honestly don't care. They're all the same.
But in the US, they care a lot about who's occupying the Oval Office, right? Sure.
Well, we watch that as a kind of comic soap opera. It's like it's highly amusing.
All right.
It's like the Americans have taken Monty Python from us, the way they run.
All right. Yes.
And they kind of, but you know,
Yeah.
That's what we say. More funny if less true.
Yeah, sure. We have a few.
Okay, so yeah, I will agree with you, Fraser, as well, that elections in the UK are done really, really fast and quick, and the winner comes out. And Britain is very good at that.
Yeah,
and
sure.
yes, one other thing I would add is, like he said, nobody really cares who the prime minister is. If you look at the turnout,
but I would be interested to know if Ali agrees that. You know, I keep saying that unfortunately in this country we don't really have Africa on our mind. I wish we did. I think it's a really important continent. I wonder what Ali, Dr. Ali thinks.
Well, it's apparent none of the political parties, the mainstream political parties, really had anything for Africa or anything about Africa. And which is why there is that high level of apathy from Africans about who wins or loses in the end. I know of many occasions I had to talk to my African friends to go out and vote, and they'll say, "No, I don't care. Whoever wins, let them win." But of course, one thing that sometimes, stimulates people to go out and vote is that's my immigration thing. When people think, often when the Tories come to power, they tend to make it a lot more difficult for migrants, because that is when everything is blamed on immigrants. When the economy is tough, it's migrants. There's no space in hospitals. You cannot book appointment with your GP as migrants. You cannot, things are expensive in the markets, like we're seeing today. Nobody thinks the crisis in Ukraine, those 2 years of coronavirus, the exits from EU have all contributed more than probably the increasing number of people from outside of EU in making things more expensive. People really hardly think of that, but rather politicians have played up the presence of an increased number of people from outside of the EU as a bigger problem, which is why everything, boils down to the migrants being here. And nobody talks about what migrants contribute to the economy of this country. If you go to hospitals, a lot of people, in hospitals, you find out that we have a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, a lot of people, care homes, where you find out that it's migrants that really work there. And so many other areas where they contribute to development in so many areas.
All right.
So people, people.
So this is a product of. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is the product of the politics of populism that has been so rampant in Europe, and we have seen that between 2016 and 2020 when Donald Trump was the American president. I don't know, Hugh Fraser. Do you take it as something negative, this issue of populism, or it's an entrenched part of the European culture?
I think it's a frustration because whatever the rights and wrongs of the migrant issue are, people didn't vote for it. they voted for less and they got more. So populism is really an expression of frustration with the government. I definitely agree with a lot of what Dr. Ali said just then, that people have almost quickly forgotten the causes of all our problems. But the thing is, the government promised to reduce immigration, and it went up to 750,000 net annually, and they kind of just didn't keep that promise. So rightly or wrongly, that's why they're being punished for it, because it was a broken promise. And also, I definitely, I definitely know quite closely immigrant families, including my wife Jana, and some of them definitely feel that the numbers are too high, because as you say, immigrants get blamed for things when they're very large numbers. They kind of feel it would be more sustainable if there were lower numbers, or if there wasn't so much immigration all at once. I think that's the issue, really. But I definitely agree that Labour are seen to be more lenient on immigration, that the Conservatives' record hasn't been any different in practice. So I think it's an issue of politicians just breaking their promises, really.
Yes, definitely. So like I'm sure that Dr. Ali Musa is about to go, and we're running out of time. But finally, what's the solution towards this issue of migrant crisis, Dr. Ali Musa?
Well, I think the problem with migrants, really, most of them come here because many of them think back home there's nothing to live for. Yep. I have said it again and again, the policies there have to be better.